colleague Daniela Gerla from Germany, and I'll introduce her in a moment to make some opening remarks. Then between myself and Charlotta Streck from Climate Focus, one of the other partners in the New York Declaration platform, we'll be reviewing the refresh process and a number of the elements of the renewed NYDF work going forward. We'll have a short opportunity for questions and answers after that. So please, again, avail yourself of the Q&A function that is offered at the bottom of your webinar screen. Then we will have a keynote address from Roberto Barrero, and I'll introduce him more formally to help us set up for the panel that will follow. And I'll introduce my colleague Leah from UNDP, who will be moderating that panel, and we'll introduce the panelists. We'll have opportunity for question and answer with our panelists, and then we'll have closing remarks from Patty Carzo. So this will be a fast-moving hour and a half, and we're very excited to have you join us today. Thank you so much from wherever you are for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this webinar. I want to now turn to my friend and colleague Daniela Gerla, who's head of International Forest Climate Finance at the German Society for International Cooperation, GIZ, who's here today speaking on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature, Conservation, and Nuclear Safety, BMU. Daniela has been our partner and supporter on behalf of the German government for a number of years, and we're very excited to have her join us to provide you with some opening comments. Daniela, please.
Hello, everyone, dear participants. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the launch of the refreshed New York Declaration on Forests, or NYDF. Let me start with a few words why this refresh process happened. First, you don't refresh something that is irrelevant or you don't believe in. But the 10 goals of the NYDF are extremely relevant, and I believe the declaration has been playing an important role since its issuance in 2014. The list of endorsers is still growing, and even beyond that, the NYDF represents a unique collaborative framework of global forest goals. Second, the refresh was never intended to radically change the goals or acknowledge that we were wrong. On the contrary, the goals remain valid. The aim to end natural forest loss by 2030 is a good example. However, the lack of progress towards intermediate 2020 targets required an update to reinvigorate political will and action. A few goals were achieved, others again could benefit from editorial tweaks for clarity. All of that called for a refresh of the NYDF goals. Subsequent speakers will speak in more detail to the NYDF refresh process itself. I would like to highlight 3 points that are related to it, and I think matter for the future of the NYDF. Number one, there is no lack of declarations and intentions, and we will see more of those in the coming weeks, I'm sure. And there is no problem with declarations as such, but there is a problem with a lack of follow-up action, monitoring of progress, and accountability. As regards the NYDF, 3 things were done to actually avoid that. The German Ministry of Environment supported the establishment of the NYDF Global Platform, which is led by UNDP, to engage endorsers and mobilize follow-up action. The Climate and Land Use Alliance helped to set up an assessment process, which is led by Climate Focus, to review progress towards the achievement of the goals. And lastly, the NYDF goals are accompanied by an action agenda, which was also updated in the refresh process to be more precise and offer an expanded menu of options for stakeholders to act on the goals. I think we will need all of these 3 elements to secure progress also in the future towards the NYDF goals. Now, my second point is that I think the NYDF platform and assessment process has been playing an important role in drawing attention on the facts and figures where we actually are on forest protection and sustainable land use. One example is the latest assessment report on Goal 7, which was just released 2 days ago, and you might have seen that. It analyzed the national climate plans of the 32 countries with the greatest potential to reduce forest carbon emissions or enhance removals, and found that only 10 including Indonesia and the Democratic Republic of Congo, set explicit targets for forest protection. It also found that national and international finance to protect and restore forests is between 0.5 and 5% of what is needed, which is not a satisfying result. That was one example. Another example I would like to cite is the assessment report of Goal 5, on forest restoration, which actually uncovered that it was impossible to credibly measure that goal at the global level. Of course, the assessment partners didn't leave it there, but have been working since to establish a global monitoring system for restoration, also an outcome of the NYDF process, I would say. Finally, the third point I want to make is that not only the NYDF goals have been refreshed, but the NYDF Global Platform also underwent a reform. BMU, German Ministry of Environment, as the core funder until today, very much welcomes the structural changes to improve efficiency and impact, as well as stronger focus on supporting implementation and promoting accountability of all actors. Let me conclude by saying that the NYDF process reminds us of our responsibility to deliver, and BMU would like to see, the German Ministry of Environment would like to see the partners to continue playing that role. More funding partners are needed to secure the platform's role. That is the message I would like to leave you with. I'm looking forward to the discussion and I'm handing back over to John.
Thank you so much, Daniela, and thanks again to the government of Germany for the initial and ongoing support for the NYDF platform and the work to implement the goals of the declaration. I want to turn now to my colleague and friend, Charlotte Streck, co-founder and managing partner of Climate Focus. Our partner is one of the organizations in the NYDF platform to review some of the key elements of the refresh process and the plans going forward. Charlotte.
Okay, good. There was an institutional part of the refresh, and then there was a refresh of the document. John will talk about the document. I will first take you through the institutional refresh. You know, the New York Declaration on Platform adopted in 2014 and supported by more than 200 endorsers. This declaration has two offsprings. One is the New York Declaration Assessment Partners that were established just 6 months after the adoption of the New York Declaration and are the accountability mechanism to the declaration, essentially avoiding that the New York Declaration shares the fate of so many announcements, as Daniela mentioned, that as the limelight spotlight fades, so does the announcements. So with the assessment partners, the New York Declaration stayed high up, in the news because of annual reports. I will get to that. Just another year later, the New York Declaration on Forest Global Platform was created, which is effectively the institutional home of the forest, and equally important as the accountability is that a document and a declaration has an institutional home. That's the platform. The platform and the assessments have for the longest time operated under different brands, cooperated. There was always cooperation, but it was two different things. And that has created significant confusion. We know this because the assessment partners underwent an evaluation in 2019 and 20, and one of the findings was that many people got confused. What is the declaration? What is the platform? What are the assessment partners? So now, as part of the refresh process, we brought the platform and the progress assessment together under one home, under one umbrella, under one brand, if you want, which is the forestdeclaration.org website. And also we are now even closer coordinating the accountability part and the findings and translate that in work plans of the platform that then can be implemented by the platform partners. And next slide. The platform partners operate under the leadership of the UNDP Climate and Forest Team, which ensures not only a direct linking to the head office of the UNDP, but for our purposes, even more importantly, to the UNTP country offices. So it gives us a global presence and a global reach. Other partners of the platform are Meridian and Climate Advisors and Climate Focus, which I represent here now as the Secretariat of the Assessment Partners. The platform engages with the endorsers. So if you are here on this call and want to become an endorser, the platform, in this case, Meridian, will pick up the phone and take your application. If you are an existing endorser and you have some griefs or anything to share, equally the platform is the one that is responding. The platform also convenes and organizes high-level events to host, to make sure that the concern of the New York Declaration remains high on the political agenda. And we also provide a platform for more and more ambitious announcement, which we then will include also in our follow-up and accountability. The platform will also develop work plans and share best practices and work more hands-on, as we did before, with endorsers on implementation of action that contributes to achieving the global goals of the New York Declaration. Next slide. The assessment partners, which should come now on the next slide. So the assessment partners are a network of leading think tanks and NGOs that since 2015 have put together and published reports that summarize the progress towards the 10 goals of the New York Declaration. We do an annual assessment of all goals and publish a short update, and then we do a deep dive on one particular goal or two associated goals. So we combine the two goals on finance, for example, 8 and 9, or last year we have on goals 3 and 4 on basic needs and other economic sectors that drive deforestation. With these assessments and annual reports, we bring together science and progress and implementation. And these assessment reports have become cornerstones before the COP, before the Conference of the Parties to the UNFCCC, to give an update on the state of the forest with a particular focus on the goal. We now also develop, which we didn't do in the earlier years, we develop recommendations that then will translate into work plans for the platform. Next slide, I'm there yet now. So 2 days ago, the latest progress report was released. It focused on goal 7, which is referring to ambitious global goals in the context of a climate treaty. Remember, the New York Declaration was adopted in 2014. That was before the Paris Agreement was adopted. We established that the Paris Agreement is ambitious and make reference to forest that we said back then in 2015 and 16. Generally, the goal 7 is met because we have integration of forest and forest goals in an ambitious climate agreement. But that alone is not enough. It needs to be translated into action. So what we looked now in preparation also of COP26 and Glasgow, we looked at where are the countries in implementing their forest goals, how ambitious are they, and where do they fall short? Good news is most countries recognize now that forests are essential and an essential climate solution, and they the countries with the highest mitigation potential, so that are dependent in a way on forests to meet their climate targets, of the ones with the highest potential and the ones that then have forest goals, they cover not even half of the potential. So there is room for a lot more ambition, even with the countries where nature-based solutions are an essential part of their climate contribution. However, in many cases, the developing countries also are not enabled yet to raise the ambition or to work towards these goals, because if we look at finance is at the moment, at minimum, less than 5% of the investment needed so that the potential of forest and the forest mitigation potential can be tapped into. Unfortunately, also few and nationally determined contributions acknowledge the importance of indigenous peoples and local communities as stewards of forests, and communities and stewards from which we can learn a lot, considering, you know, the centuries of experience that these groups have in being good stewards of the forest. So overall, there's some progress. You know, we are moving, as in many of these presentations that I'm giving. There is progress and there is movement, but it is not fast enough. A lot more needs to happen. And we, as the platform and the assessment partner, are happy and proud and encouraged and motivated to contribute our little part on achieving these goals of the New York Declaration. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotta. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to just quickly run through a couple key points related to the refresh process that led to the outcomes that Charlotta just described. We did have a endorser working group made up of endorsers organizations that came from across the spectrum of interests. We also reached out to a number, many other stakeholders for direct input and thoughts on what should be done to update and refresh the New York Declaration itself. Declaration is now finalized with this event, and there will be an accompanying action agenda that will be available and finalized in the first quarter of 2022. We want to make sure we incorporate new commitments and actions that become apparent through the coming COP into that action agenda. The action agenda is really focused on giving specific guidance and suggestions to various sectors about the actions that can be taken to work to reach the goals. Let's go to the next slide. There are a number of important key changes in the refresh. These are just some of the cross-cutting elements that were taken into account. First of all, we did try to preserve the strong ambition of the original NYDF. So none of these changes were meant to water down the ambition. In fact, they were meant in some cases to sharpen the ambition and to integrate understandings of the challenges associated with meeting these goals that Charlotta just referenced, that many of us are now aware of. And we received a lot of good input and guidance on how to do that while still preserving the major thrust of the 10 NYDF goals. So we've re-emphasize the importance of preserving forest integrity by protecting intact forests. We've strengthened the recognition and rights of indigenous people and local communities as critical contributors to forest protection, and also the importance of protecting them as forest protectors. We have promoted a systematic and multi-sectoral approach to ending deforestation and strengthening the commitment of the goals, particularly goal 2 and goal 3 on agricultural commodities and mining. And we've updated the language to focus more on implementation, because I think we all understand that's the challenge that faces all of us if we're going to be meeting these NYDF, the ultimate NYDF goal of removing deforestation by 2030. Next slide. There are some challenges that were faced, of course, in the process of assessing where we've come to date against the NYDF goals. And we believe this process that we're formally launching today has been very good at both revising the content of the declaration, but also the ambition and the platform itself, as Charlotta mentioned. We believe that the NYDF is still considered as the most broad-reaching and comprehensive framework for addressing the needs of removing deforestation and land conversion, and that reinforcing the 2030 goal is critical. So that was part of our endeavor. We believe that the ending natural forest loss by 2030 requires a paradigm shift by the global community that values forests for all of their essential benefits and prioritizing their protection. And again, want to emphasize that the NYDF is distinct from other commitment platforms because it does address all the various elements and dimensions of the deforestation issue, not just deforestation itself. It recognizes the interrelated dimensions of solving this problem. Next slide. So we would, going ahead, we would call on those of you who may not have endorsed the NYDF to date to consider doing so, as Charlotta encouraged, and please contact us at the platform at Meridian Institute if you have that interest. We are planning and executing an event at the Global Landscapes Forum on November 5th at the upcoming COP. So if you're going to be at the COP or can join that event virtually, we would welcome that. And we will want to engage all of you as we roll out the action agenda and seek your engagement in the vital implementation work that's necessary to move us forward. So thank you all, and thank you all again for joining, those who have joined since we got started. Much appreciate your participation today. Let's go to the next slide. So we're very pleased today to be joined by two colleagues who have been part of that refresh process that I just outlined. And I'm going to introduce them both now, and then I'll turn it over first to Sarah. So first, we're joined by Sarah Lake, who is founder and executive director of a new initiative that is focusing on sustainable foods and the transition of deforestation and commodity supply chains. And it's an exciting new venture that I know you'll be hearing more about in the coming days and weeks and months. And then John Hickson, who is Chief Sustainability Officer and Vice President of Global Government Affairs at Yum Brands. Both Sarah and John were members of the group that helped us guide this refresh process, and we've asked them to share a few thoughts from their perspective about the refresh process and the NYDF going forward. Sarah?
Thanks, John, for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me to speak. As part of the refresh process, one of the things I found particularly inspiring was that the process itself was undertaken in the way in which we would actually want to implement our work towards the NYDF goals. So the process itself was consultative, it was inclusive, and it was really honest about the shortcomings of the original version of the NYDF goals. And it used the reflections on those shortcomings in order to inform sharper and more effective goals moving forward. I think that there was no shying away from where the language could be improved or the actual content of the goals could be more powerful. I think while some of the changes might seem linguistic or just fine-tuning, it actually reflects a really important shift in our confidence and in our collective understanding of what must happen. So for example, before, I think goal number 1 said that we were striving to end natural forest loss. Now the goal is just simply to end degradation and forest loss by 2030. So we are no longer just striving, there is only doing and achieving. And I think this small shift is actually really symbolic of where we are now in our collective efforts of focusing on the ambitious level of change that needs to happen rather than the effort itself, of not backing down from the degree of change that we must achieve within an even shorter time period. Additionally, the process was quite inclusive, as I mentioned, and I think this reflects the actual shift in the content as well. So the revisions newly call out considerations of Indigenous and local communities, as well as women and youth. And I think this is an important consideration, as Charlotta highlighted in the assessment of goal number 7, that there's an absence of centering many of the local Indigenous communities at the heart of our work. And now the process, as well as the revisions, put the wealth of knowledge and the centuries of experience of local and Indigenous communities, as well as women and youth, at the heart of what we're doing, reflecting what has been proven again and again in research, that these communities are the best protectors of forests. And one of the other pieces of the process is really focusing on this action agenda. And I think the discussions around revision were saying not just what our goals are, but how are we supportive of those endorsers in how the goals are redefined and rewritten, as well as how do we provide the additional context to ensure endorsers have the information in order to implement those. So we're moving beyond just high-level goals and ambitions to the actual work that must be done to achieve those. So I think in reflection of the whole process, I think the best way to capture it is that it was really reflective of our shortcomings. And I think moving forward sets the groundwork for these critical assessments that the NYDF assessment partnership will undertake to say, we're doing well, but we're not doing enough. How do we increase our ambition within the very short timeline we have? And how do we be very honest with ourselves about where more investment is needed, about how we can do better, and calling out on others to make sure we have the accountability in place to achieve that change. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and I'm excited to have been a part of the process and looking forward to working with the community to implement the changes towards the new NYDF goals.
Thank you, Sarah, very much. And let me just encourage, if anyone has questions for Sarah or John, who will be speaking next, please put those into the Q&A, or any of us who have been involved in the refresh process, any aspect of the refresh process that you have any questions about, please put those into the Q&A, and we'll take a few minutes after John completes his comments to respond to those questions. But John Hickson, if you would like to make some comments reflecting on your experience in the process and the path forward, that would be excellent. Thank you, John. I believe you're on mute, my friend.
Oh, all this time in Zoom and it still happens. So just first want to say thank you, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of the refresh process. I think as kind of mentioned by two of our previous speakers, both Sarah and Daniela, I think there's some very powerful things that come out of the refresh process. And I too appreciated the collaborative process that it all brought together to really drive home the key issues and challenges I think we all see. Throughout the process, I think the document we have now adds more clarity, kind of really tangible actions around where the goals are, and that honest reflection of the progress or lack thereof that we've all tried to drive forward. And as mentioned earlier, there are a lot of declarations that are out there. One of the things I find most powerful about the New York Declaration is that participation from the private sector, endorsements from critical governments, as well as the NGOs. And I know as a private sector participant who's kind of been on this journey where it has absolutely been a challenge, the NYDF has been an enormous platform to kind of elevate goals, elevate aspirations, and harmonize those across all the key drivers of deforestation, and allowed to be able to, when you look at the 10 goals specifically, I think the process of refreshing them really highlighted the power of kind of building many layers on to efforts to try to address deforestation, whether it's policies, mapping, transparency, kind of use of technology, all while reflecting the critical nature of indigenous communities and forests and the people that live in them. So I think it's a critical document, and it's rather unique. Again, one of the few ones that really brings forward a collaborative set of endorsers and had a collaborative process to refresh it. It's been a challenging 7 years. I think any of us know that have been in this space. The results are not where we want them to be, but I'm really pleased with the elevation, the clarity, and the kind of infrastructure support that's provided through the NYDF. So for us, the process has been great, seeks to elevate, seeks to bring things together, and it certainly helps pull resources and alignment kind of from all those same sectors that we need to see. So we've been really pleased to be a part of the process, pleased to be able to kind of add our own views of kind of what works, what doesn't, and really collaborate with others to try to address this significant global challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah and John. And I'm not seeing any specific questions in the box. We do have one question, but I think we'll save that for the panel discussion that's upcoming, because I think there'll be a better place to respond to that particular question. And I think, but if you have any questions as we go forward, please put those in, and we'll certainly respond to those in the process as we go forward. But I want to turn now, we're very pleased to have the opportunity to hear from Roberto Barrero, Interim Executive Director of the Tribal Link Foundation, to help set up some of the context and issues that we'll be discussing with our panelists here in a few minutes. Roberto?
Taigwe, dituno, kena, datiaono, diri, mukaro, agwebana, boriken, taino daka, kawai daka iaha. Greetings, relatives. I've just given you a brief introduction in my indigenous Taino language. letting you know my name, lineage, and that I'm happy to be here with you all. I'm honored to share some remarks during this launch of the refreshed New York Declaration on Forest, as my people and indigenous peoples around the world know that healthy forests are essential to and for our present and future generations. As forests support up to 80% of terrestrial biodiversity, it's not a coincidence that 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is found in indigenous peoples' territories. In fact, many current studies affirm that when indigenous peoples have control over their forest, and by control, what I mean is secure title, respect for their rights, recognition of our traditional territories, that's where we see forests largely intact and biodiversity thriving. These reports make it clear that indigenous peoples are the best guardians of our forest when compared to those who are responsible for the region's other forest. To continue to be the guardians of the forest, however, indigenous peoples need to freely determine our own developmental paths and priorities consistent with our right to self determination and other recognized collective and individual human rights. So, this rights based, justice attentive approach should be the centerpiece of any environmental policy, including the follow up to the NDF. Ironically, while academia and the international system and others have many times acknowledged the special relationship that indigenous peoples have with our lands, territories, and resources, as well as our traditional knowledge, indigenous peoples are still suffering grave human rights abuses all around the world. Indigenous activists made up nearly one-third of the total 331 human rights defenders killed worldwide in 2020, even though indigenous peoples comprise only about 6% of the global population. So, as the NDF coalition prepares to further develop an action plan, it's critical to note that the historic colonial model of safeguarding landscapes and biodiversity through protected areas is part of a long history of mistreatment and abuse of indigenous peoples. This concern has recently manifested, for example, in relation to the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, also known as the COP15 3030 proposal. Many indigenous peoples, organizations, and environmentalists fear that the 3030 proposal will lead to human rights abuses across the globe, including large scale land grabbing and dispossession of indigenous peoples from our lands and territories. Therefore, prior to the adoption of the Leaders' Pledge and related policies and programs on the national and international levels, indigenous peoples are calling for the inclusion of language to safeguard the internationally recognized minimum standard for the rights of indigenous peoples as follows. Nothing in this policy can be construed as diminishing or extinguishing the rights of indigenous peoples as affirmed in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. As the Declaration on Forests does not mention the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, I feel this safeguard language should be included in the action plan. Finally, while there's no one size fits all approach to achieving all the outcomes desired in the NDF, transferring power to indigenous peoples, respecting our rights, and helping us secure formal land tenure is a good place to begin, and it costs significantly less than evictions and park management. But securing rights is just the first step, as funding should also be redirected to indigenous peoples for governance support and technical resources, among others. With this in mind, I'll end my comments and say Hahom, thank you for the opportunity to share with you this morning.
Thank you so much, Roberto, and rest assured we will take your request and encouragement for that inclusion in the action agenda. Absolutely. The NYDF has long valued the critical role that indigenous people play in the in achieving the goals of the declaration. So we're very pleased, and thank you so much for joining us with your remarks. I want to turn now to my friend and colleague, Leah Paz Rivera, Senior Program Manager of International Forestry at the UN Development Program, one of the foundational partners in the NYDF, to introduce and moderate our panel. We're very excited about Leah.
Thank you, John, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all after having worked for many months on this refresh process and the revised global platform structure, to being able to serve better to our endorsers and to move forward on this critical agenda that we have. We have only 8 years to really reverse the trends on deforestation, and we can only do it if we work in a multi-stakeholder collaborative process, including subnational stakeholders, national governments, indigenous peoples and local communities, and civil society and the private sector. So we need a collective, renewed effort to implement this refreshed NYDF. And I'm very excited to be here introducing this wonderful group of panelists that reflect these different perspectives that I just mentioned, all the constituencies of NYDF. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to ask you all to provide us with some reflections in relation to what have been from your perspective, from your constituencies, your lessons on progress and challenges towards implementing the NYDF goals. And more importantly, what are your views on what needs to happen in the upcoming years to change drastically the way that the pathway that we are into, and to really move into delivering effective implementation and achieving the goals of NYDF. So my panelists are Dr. Edu Ephraim, who's a state coordinator from the GEF UNDP Sustainable Fuel Progress at Cross River State Forestry Commission in Nigeria. Then I have Jennifer Koinante, Executive Director of Yaku Laikipia Trust in Kenya. Silvia Llamas, my friend Silvia Llamas, Coordinator of Operations in Pro Natura Sur, and also serves as the GCFTF Country Coordinator in Mexico. So she has experience with the civil society, but also working directly with state governments that are part of this very important subnational initiative. Pablo Montoya, Sustainability Director of Grupo Éxito, based in Colombia, and has been actively engaged in the refresh process as well, and will provide a perspective from the private sector. And last but not least, we're honored to have Ms. Glenda Ortega, the Undersecretary of Natural Heritage in the Ministry of Environment, Water and Ecological Transition in Ecuador. She's also the director of the RED Early Movers program that implements funding in Ecuador as part of the cooperation with Germany and Norway in recognition of Ecuador's great progress on reducing emissions from deforestation. So welcome you all, and I'm gonna ask that we start in the same order that I mentioned. So let's hear from Dr. Edu Ephraim. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Claire. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share, and good afternoon. Greetings from Calabar, the capital city of Cross River State, Nigeria. And I also bring you the greeting of my permanent secretary, Mr. Felix Ita, who would have loved to be here, but is unavoidably absent. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to share experience on how we've been implementing the NYDF towards actualizing these goals. So I would like to start by saying that humanity faces unprecedented environmental challenges, of which increasing rate of deforestation is one of them, and for which we are very thankful for frameworks like NYDF, GCF, conventions like CBD and the rest, have come up with meaningful targets, ambitious though, but very well-meaning towards addressing these challenges. Although the progress is slow, but efforts are steadily towards it. And I'm happy from what we've said so far that collaborative effort is the new paradigm shifts now towards. So, and that's really true. If we want to make significant progress towards attending these goals, then there has to be a rethink. We have to rethink our strategy and move from the business as usual. I mean, the speaker about the rights of indigenous people talked about this issue of park management and the conflict. So it's always been there. So we have to move from just a piecemeal scheme and strategy to a more collaborative, more interactive, and more a scheme that has the harmony of the different dimensions, because the problem of deforestation is multifaceted. And so I'm glad to have this opportunity to share with you our programs, looking at 2 programs which we have engaged in towards meeting the NYDF goal. Management program, which is a program I've been coordinating for my state for the past 4 years. And so a little background to this is that over 50% of the wood to meet their energy need for cooking and for heating. And this has a considerable pressure on the remaining intact forest. And this is really huge for Cross River State that houses over 50% of the remaining intact forest. And then also in recent times, African leaders have been having this conversation, and it has to do with what are we, where are we carrying out development? Which area need to be protected when it comes to the forest? And which one do we trade off for development? We can run away from these questions because Africans, constitute in their population highest of young people, and so it's a growing economy. So we have to find a way to marry in to keep in the human dimension, the issue of agricultural intensification and the issue of reform livelihood and even economic development into our agendas and our strategy for checking and addressing deforestation. So that is how the Sustainable Firewood Program, which I call SFM, was instituted. And the idea is to see how you can sustainably raise plantation of fast-growing species and indigenous species, and considering this conversation of where should we carry out intense conservation, protection, and where could we bring in and meet other needs like agricultural need for food and the rest. So we have this plantation, and we've been able to establish over 25 hectares of firewood lots where we raise plantation for firewood, for timber, and we've also trained over 80 farmers on agroforestry, and we've also carried out fabrication of cook stove. And also now the Red Plus project program has gained a lot of traction over the years. We now have an investment plan, and also in collaboration with concerns, development concern, through the program has been able to train 40 community members to carry out patrol, to help in the patrolling of this intact forest, and also women, about 30 women in gardening, and also to carry out cocoa farming in a more eco-friendly manner. So in conclusion, I would like to say that to accelerate effort, tangible action needs to be taken to achieve the NYDF. That will mean that African tropics as a whole need to be supported. That support needs to be strengthened towards building capacity, and this capacity runs from the community, from the grassroots to the policymakers. And we have to also strengthen the institution so that they can mainstream the best practices. Current best practices are evolving over time into our policies and also our agenda. And then also there is need to scale up collaborative, result-oriented strategies and programs like the SFM, like the Red Plus program, so that we can be able to impact the community in a more balanced way. We can be able to halt deforestation, arrest deforestation to a very considerable extent while meeting social and economic needs of the people. Because until we get to this point, we will be closing, as far as it concerns checking deforestation, we will be closing the front door while leaving the back door open. So thank you very much. I like to respect time, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ido. That was fantastic. I think it's so important to hear the perspective of a subnational state like Cross River State, and you bring up some very important experiences on what really takes to put in practice NYDF and this issue of sustainable fuel management is obviously critical for Nigeria and for the African region. So the work you're doing and the pathway to really address this would be an excellent example for other endorsers. And also to highlight that most of the forests in Nigeria, as I understand, are all concentrated in Cross River State. So you're in a critical state there that could really provide a model for the region. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I invite now Jennifer. Can you turn your camera on and provide us with the reflections from your perspective? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to all of you all over the world. I'm Jennifer Koinante, the director for Yako Laikipia Trust, an organization that is based in Laikipia in Kenya, and it is working for indigenous people, especially the forest dwellers, because this is where we came from. We come from a forest called Mgogodo Forest, which is a tropical forest. It is adjusted to the Mount Kenya forest, which Mount Kenya is the high, one of the, I think it is the second highest mountain in the world, and the only one in the equator that has snow. So,
I'm sorry, we're losing you, Jennifer. We're gonna try to turn off our cameras. Let's see if we can hear you.
We are located in a very unique place, in the tropical area. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Jennifer. If I may ask all the panelists to turn off our cameras to give a more band for Jennifer. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. So I hope you are hearing me now. Okay.
Jennifer, sorry, we're missing you again. May I suggest if you can turn off your camera as well, Jennifer, and we can try again. And Arnald, if you can mute, I'm gonna mute.
I'm saying,
So until, you know, Jennifer, sorry, we have lost you. That's the reality of this virtual conference world. We've lost you. May I ask you to stop now and we can retry? And on the meantime, I can switch to the next panelist. And Liz is going to try to reach out to you to see if we can have a better connection. I'm sorry we lost Jennifer. Could we turn now to Silvia while we try to figure this out? Dear Silvia, are you there?
Hola.
Hola.
Buenos días, tardes, noches. ¿Me
Hello.
escuchan bien?
Hello,
Perfectamente.
can you hear me?
Ay, ¿qué hago?
Hello,
¿Qué hacemos, Clea? ¿Volvemos con Jennifer?
hello.
No,
Hello,
no,
can
you
you-
keep going. Please keep going.
Ok.
Yeah, please go.
Ok, lo que pasa es que la escucho a ella, entonces no sabía qué hacer.
Creo que es el canal del intérprete, no te preocupes. Entonces,
Perfecto.
adelante.
Ok, entonces, muchas gracias por la invitación a todo el equipo que está organizando este evento. Les voy a compartir unas diapositivas mientras platico para que puedan tener un poquito más de información de esto que les voy a compartir. Y bueno, mi nombre es Silvia Llamas, como ya lo dijo Clara. Trabajo en Pronatura Sur, que es la organización que coordina el trabajo del Grupo de Gobernadores por el Clima y Bosques, el GCF Task Force, que precisamente pues, es una iniciativa de gobiernos subnacionales, provincias, estados. Los miembros son 38, provenientes de 10 países, y entre todas estas jurisdicciones miembro, representan aproximadamente el 25% de los bosques tropicales del mundo. Tenemos aquí en la diapositiva un mapita que nos puede ayudar a identificar quiénes son los miembros. Y bueno, en México en particular tenemos 7 miembros que representan aproximadamente el 66% de los bosques tropicales de nuestro país. Los miembros que están en negritas son los que son ya firmantes de la Declaratoria de Nueva York. Y bueno, podrán ver que son estados desde Jalisco, que está hacia el occidente, y hacia el sur del país, que es donde los bosques tropicales abundan en mayor medida. Bueno, el GCF Task Force justo se formó para buscar este apoyo a nivel subnacional, que como todos sabemos y como se ha comentado ya anteriormente, pues es uno de las fortalezas o de las estrategias que hay que fortalecer para lograr avanzar en la medida de lo posible en todos estos compromisos que tanto las naciones como los propios miembros subnacionales firman. De hecho, el GCF Task Force comenzó con la firma de la Declaratoria de Río Branco, la Declaratoria del Río Branco, que justamente está vinculada a la reducción de emisiones por degradación y deforestación y que se empalma muy bien con los objetivos de la Declaratoria. Por lo que esta iniciativa subnacional ha trabajado para ayudar a los estados miembros y a las provincias miembros a que puedan avanzar en el cumplimiento de sus compromisos a través del fortalecimiento de sus estrategias para la reducción de emisiones y el desarrollo rural bajo en emisiones. Lo que hemos identificado, evidentemente por la colaboración con las propias jurisdicciones estatales, es pues la falta de financiamiento, que ya todos lo sabemos. A nivel subnacional, las reducciones de financiamiento y de presupuestos son muy notorias, y eso es uno de los obstáculos que tienen los estados y las provincias para poder seguir avanzando en estos compromisos, porque se reducen los presupuestos para seguir avanzando en la implementación. Entonces, al principio el GCF Task Force estaba trabajando en fortalecer a estos estados y a estos gobiernos estatales, que es con quienes trabajamos principalmente las secretarías de medio ambiente. Y al ir avanzando nos fuimos dando cuenta cómo uno de los principales retos, como mencioné, era el financiamiento para implementar. Entonces se han abierto dos líneas de financiamiento muy particular en colaboración con el gobierno de Noruega y con el PNUD precisamente, para tratar de apoyar a los estados en esta primer línea que terminó en 2020, terminar de fortalecer y ajustar sus estrategias de reducción de emisiones y de desarrollo rural de bajas emisiones. Y después, empezando este año, un financiamiento para ciertos estados que se manejó a través de propuestas en las que pudieran presentar propuestas, proyectos o estrategias innovadoras que pudieran asegurar que el avance hacia la reducción de emisiones se iba a acelerar con este tipo de financiamiento. Entonces, estos dos financiamientos han estado tratando de empujar a los estados y apoyarlos a que, pues, no nada más aumenten su compromiso, sino que puedan contar justamente con las herramientas que les permitan avanzar por la implementación de sus estrategias y que puedan llegar a cumplir en algún punto sus compromisos, que es mucho de lo que en nuestra participación en esta actualización tratamos de poner en la mesa, también las limitantes que hay a nivel subnacional y la mucha ayuda y apoyo que se requiere de diferentes iniciativas para aterrizar en la implementación. Y bueno, como estamos muy cortos de tiempo, no voy a alcanzar a presentarles todas las diapositivas que tenía, pero pues estamos justamente trabajando en dos líneas estratégicas en México en particular, que es dándonos cuenta cuáles son los drivers de deforestación que son más significativos en estas regiones y tratando de apoyar para que se puedan implementar todas estas acciones y proyectos vinculados a avanzar en la reducción de la deforestación y degradación de los bosques. Otra parte en la que hemos estado ayudando y colaborando con los estados en particular en México, pues es en poder seguir trabajando de manera coordinada con la federación para anidar todos estos sistemas que permitan monitorear y reportar cómo están los avances de todas estas estrategias que están implementando, pero también poder dar resultados a estos compromisos a los que están firmando y se están acercando los gobiernos estatales en el país y en general en todos los países miembros del GCF Task Force. Muchas gracias y bueno, pues pasamos a la siguiente fase de la presentación.
Muchas gracias, Silvia, por esa intervención y perdona que el tiempo no fue suficiente para expandirte como hubiera sido, como hubiéramos deseado. Pero de todas formas me parece que resaltas de manera muy clara la importancia de aterrizar las políticas nacionales a nivel subestatal de una manera integrada para que se puedan implementar. Y esto es obviamente una de las grandes barreras para la reducción de la deforestación, sobre todo en los países grandes como México. Es crítico que los actores subnacionales tengan la capacidad y los instrumentos, así como el financiamiento para implementar las acciones de reducción de deforestación. Y me quedo en español, me parece, porque los siguientes dos panelistas también nos van a hablar en español. Espero que la interpretación esté funcionando bien. Me indican, por favor, por el chat. Pasamos entonces a nuestro siguiente panelista. Pasamos de una mirada subnacional al sector privado. Entonces, y Jennifer va a hablar, ok, Jennifer está conectada de nuevo. Okay, I'm gonna switch to English again. I'm so sorry. I think we got Jennifer back. So Jennifer, I'm gonna grab you now that I have a good connection with you. I don't want to lose you again. So let's go back to you, Jennifer. Please continue. You started telling us about your work with indigenous people. So, and we lost you right at the beginning. Please continue.
Okay. Thank you again. So I had already said my name is Jennifer, so I'll go straight to discuss and bring my sharing to this forum. And I want to speak on three goals. The goal number 4, 8, and 10. I want to start with goal 10, just to give a reflection, because it is so much related with indigenous contribution. When we see goal 10, it is strengthening forest governance, transparency, and the rule of law, while also empowering communities and recognizing the right of indigenous people, especially those pertaining to the lands and the resources. So this is a very important goal to indigenous people. As Roberto said at the beginning, he spoke about the right and the recognition and appreciation and the respect and to the indigenous people. Indigenous people, they live like the way I've started saying that I come from a forest dwelling community. We live in Ngogodo forest. We have several forests in Kenya and in East Africa and in the other regions of Africa. The indigenous people, and also in the reserves that we call our own farms, the big ranches that we have, where we live with the wildlife and the natural nature. All the trees we respect it, because our culture is really enshrined in protection of that nature, because we depend on it. So when we look at goal 10, we are asking that indigenous people should be empowered so that they can be able to document, do research to ensure that their traditional knowledge that is helping them to maintain the forest and the nature and the ecosystem within that area. Their traditional knowledge should be restored. Their languages are very rich with the knowledge, and it carries a lot of things. So we are saying, how do we, as a New York Declaration on Forest, support these communities to make these goals actionable? I thank and I appreciate that we have come a long way as the partners, stakeholders, endorsers, and the private sector in bringing about this issue of the 10 goals. Now that we want to go to the action, what action are we going to give so that an action is taken from right to the people who are really protecting the forest, who are the custodian of nature, who are living and surviving together as ecosystem? So look at goal 10. This is a very important thing, that we make it actionable. How do we go direct to empower them? How do we empower them to restore their languages? What about the natural trees, the traditional trees with the medicine, with the food, and they are very, very important. So this is a very important thing that I want us to look at in goal 10, so that it can be actionable, so that private sectors, those who are causing emission, could come down to support indigenous people to restore their nature, to be able to empower them, to be able, because they also need to adapt to this climate change. How do we do the adaptation? The issue of improved GECOS, the use of solar that we get from the sun free, rather than cutting the trees, burning charcoals, using it for fuel, for building houses. We are encroaching it. Schools are growing. How do we get alternative as a way of adaptation? How do we help them? For those who are causing the emission, the green gases, How do they come in? How do we bring them as a New York Declaration on Forest, bring these people and those who are emitters so that we can be able to take action together. If I look at goal 4, we are saying support alternative of deforestation driven by basic need, such as subsistence farming and resilience and fuel wood energy. So how this goal 4 is also another important thing that we indigenous people wanted to be actionable. How do we give them alternative of livelihood? How can we give them an improvement of making the trees live so that they can be able to harvest their own honey, they harvest their own fruits, and they continue planting and putting trees, making their trees survive, living with their livestock, and they be able to survive together by the support of anybody else who is causing emission. So I look at another goal, which is goal 8. If you look at goal 8, it says provide support for the development and implementation of strategies to reduce forest emission. What support are we really giving them? Since we started discussing about this New York Declaration on Forest, we've been speaking it. I have come to New York. We did an endorsement. We endorsed it. We have worked on it. Now, how do we now go really to tackle the issue of deforestation so that it can stop from the Amazon forest to the Rwanda to Kenya to all over? So how do we make it actionable? This is a very important one because we are saying provide support, but which support? Have we done that? So how are we going to do it? So those are things that we need now as we move to the action part, we need really to consider. I'm looking at goal 9. Countries and how do we bring the countries that we want to reward, bring them join together so that the people in the wilderness and in the forest and where they live, so that they can start planting trees and making their seed beds from their own nature. So I think because of time, I would like just to say thank you very much for giving me this chance, but I also want to say we need to think about those endorsers, those meetings that we make. At times we incur expenses, we get into internet data, we buy it, and we also do a lot of things, printing papers like these ones, now when we read about. So we need to be given support because we cannot work just from nowhere. You cannot just keep on getting your own money to get in these meetings and the time. So it is also good that those endorsers should be empowered, even by providing the electricity and the data. So it is good that we bring these things out because sometimes you might not be able to even make meetings because of these shortcomings. So I think that is enough for me today. Thank you so much. We shall continue supporting this process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I think you brought up some really important points. We hear you. And I think I just wanted to be clear. I think NYDF goal of ending deforestation to 2030 cannot be met without implementing fully goal 10, as you have mentioned. I think we consider goal 10 as cross-cutting and fundamental. If we don't address governance issues and right issues, we are not going to be able to meet any of the other goals. So, and for that is critical to hear your voice and the recommendations that you're giving us. And I think we're all here acknowledging that we are not in track. We're not in track, and we need to reverse this the trend that we're undergoing. And for that, of course, the role and guidance of indigenous peoples and the need to really change the business as usual is critical. So thank you so much for making these points, and we take also your note of the difficulties to connect in these virtual times, and the digital divide is a reality, and we recognize that we need to do more to support our endorsers to be able to participate in these conditions. But thank you so much, and we will keep engaged and working with you on the action agenda. We look forward to your inputs for the action agenda. Everyone, I just remind you that you can start writing your questions in the Q&A function of the webinar. So please take advantage of writing your questions. We've heard already 3 perspectives from the panelists. So it would be really good to hear from you, from all the participants in the webinar. Okay, I turn now to Pablo Montoya Davila. Pablo is from Grupo Éxito in Colombia, and he's going to be providing us the perspective from the private sector point of view. What are your lessons, the progress, challenges that you face in trying to make sense of this, the global commitments on forests and on NYDF and others, and how do you see the way forward? The floor is yours, Pablo.
Thank you, Clea. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you. I want to thank all the UNDP team, to you, Clea, that we also have been working with the FACT dialogue and other stages as well, to Maria Elena, to Liz and Anna, all the team who has helped us to create this event. So for those who don't know, Grupo Éxito is a retailer company based in Colombia. And we are committed to the New York Declaration on Forest, but we are also working with the Consumer Goods Forum and the Forest Positive Coalition. We are signatories of the Tropical Forest Alliance. We work with the cattle, the Roundtable for the palm oil, and the Roundtable for beef in Colombia. So we are highly committed to understand our supply chain and see how can, through a shared value perspective, it's not a subsidiary perspective, it's not just by providing subsidies, it's by understanding how can we implement our business as usual, but creating these new necessities and make our suppliers understand that this is not a priority just for the company, it's a priority for the whole chain, including consumers. So I just want to explain very fast what we have done, and also the steps we still need to move forward. The company has nationwide nearly 4,000 hectares monitored, which those lands are owned by our suppliers that grow beef. So I want to get focused on the beef point of view. So we have 447 farms. They are all split through 9 departments in Colombia. And by monitoring those lands, we have created an alliance. And then that alliance is led by Climate Focus and the Agricultural Center for Tropical Tropical Agriculture, the Institute for Tropical Agriculture. And they have an institution that's named GANSO, in Spanish, Ganadería Sostenible. And they are the responsible for monitoring 100% of our suppliers. And we are basically checking just 2 main aspects. The first one is that all our suppliers fulfill with the agricultural border of Colombia. So it means that they are not located on a national park or land which is designated for another purposes different to agriculture production. And the second point that we are checking nationwide is deforestation. So we are taking Colombian baseline, and every single year we have this photo to what happened to the land compared to the baseline and compared to the previous year. So in that sense, we are confident that our suppliers are fulfilling our declaration and that they all have signed their commitment to follow our declaration. So this is very important, but to some extent, now that we are talking about sustainability, we know that we need to go way beyond. We cannot be comfortable just by monitoring, so we need to incentivize conservation and regeneration. And for that purpose, we are creating a new alliance, which is led by WWF and Animal Bank. And with these 2 allies, we are understanding the land, the conservation potential of each of the farms that we have, And we actually have applied to the UK Pact, and we already were selected for investing some funds in those lands in order to promote and to encourage conservation, which is one of the main challenges that we are looking at the moment. Just to summarize, so we as private sector, and actually I'm here in another side of the world, but just in the same agenda, and making coalitions, understanding the power that has working together, looking and benchmarking with the people who's doing the best in the industry. And we aim to get the knowledge of the supply chain, understand our challenges, go and be walking steps ahead. We are just like 1 month ahead of the COP26. And of course, we want to be following the agenda, making our commitments, and involving our supply chain, our suppliers, but also our customers. The retail it's like a magical world where you have the opportunity to educate and to create culture. So this is one of our main messages that I want to leave. This is not just a responsibility for one side. We all need to work together towards this purpose. Thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you so much, Pablo. That was very clear and with very important messages from the private sector perspective on how to really tackle supply chain of such an important sector like cattle ranching in Colombia. And we look forward to keep working with you on this. I'm going to move very quickly because we're running out of time for the tech issues that we have, and give the word to Glenda Ortega, Subsecretary of Patrimonio Natural, Ministerio del Ambiente y Agua y Transición Ecológica in Ecuador. Glenda, please, the floor is yours. We really want to hear from Ecuador. Glenda, can you turn on your mic, please? Let me see. Oh. I think Glenda is having some problem to connect. Liz, can you please check? Is she connected?
Claire, why don't you maybe go to our next speaker and then we'll come back.
We come back. Yeah, we're having some tech issues this morning. Apologies. So,
Claire, muy buenos días. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Muy buenos días.
Yeah, te escuchamos. We hear you. Please go ahead, Glenda. Okay, I'm gonna ask my colleague Liz to please check the connection. And while we do this, she's connecting. Let me see. Okay, Glenda, can we test now your audio? Sí, te escucho.
¿Me escuchan? Mil disculpas.
Sí, ahora sí.
Bueno, muy buenos días con todos. Mil disculpas por los inconvenientes. Creo que ahorita en esta era digital se nos complica bastante el poder actuar de manera inmediata en esto. Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Muy buenos días con todos. Primero les doy un saludo a nombre de nuestro señor ministro, Gustavo Manrique Miranda. Si bien es cierto, Ecuador es un país muy pequeño en extensión, en superficie, pero es un país enorme en su biodiversidad, ya que estamos dentro de los 20 países más megadiversos del mundo. Además, es un país comprometido con la conservación de su patrimonio natural y además con el desarrollo sostenible que permita mejorar los medios de vida de toda su población respetando el ambiente y además incorporando criterios de mitigación y adaptación al cambio climático en sus espacios productivos. A esto nosotros lo conocemos como la transición ecológica. Por esta razón, consideramos que la política pública que actualmente implementa Ecuador le ha permitido obtener importantes avances relacionados con alcanzar los objetivos de la Declaración de Nueva York sobre los bosques. En el año 2019, Ecuador empezó su camino hacia la preparación e implementación del mecanismo Red+, obviamente en el país, con la conformación del Programa Nacional Conjunto ONU-RED, y se inicia con el proyecto también Sociobosque como una acción temprana para conservar los bosques, reducir la deforestación, así como mejorar los medios de vida de la población que se encuentra directamente relacionada con el bosque. Nosotros aquí tuvimos 3 fases: la fase de preparación, que es la fase 1, la preparación de Red+, en el cual se tuvo al mecanismo Red+ en el país bajo un enfoque nacional. Además, se desarrollaron los 4 pilares para la implementación de Red+. Primero, el Plan de Acción Red+ 2016-2025. Segundo, el nivel de referencia de emisiones por deforestación. Tercero, el Sistema Nacional de Salvaguardas para la elaboración de los resúmenes de información. Y cuarto, el Sistema Nacional de Monitoreo de Bosques. Posterior a ello, en la fase 2, ya fue una fase de implementación. Aquí el país contaba y cuenta con una mirada compartida y estratégica para la ejecución de acciones, adaptando un enfoque de paisaje para la integralidad de las actividades y la suma de los esfuerzos entre el Ministerio del Ambiente, Agua y Transición Ecológica y el Ministerio de Agricultura y Ganadería, con lo cual se implementa el Programa Integral Amazónico de Conservación de Bosques y Producción Sostenible Pro-Amazonía. Finalmente, la fase 3 de pagos basados en resultados. Ecuador es uno de los países pioneros en la implementación de Red+, por lo cual el país ha recibido el reconocimiento de la comunidad internacional por los esfuerzos para reducir las emisiones provenientes de la deforestación y degradación de los bosques. Actualmente se ha logrado apalancar un financiamiento climático no reembolsable de 103.6 millones de dólares en el marco de implementación y pago por resultados de Red+. Siguiente, por favor. Otro pilar importante en el Ecuador está fuertemente comprometido con una mejor gobernanza territorial y sobre todo con la participación de los pueblos y nacionales indígenas. Los planes de desarrollo y ordenamiento territorial, los PDIOTs, son instrumentos de planificación de los gobiernos autónomos descentralizados que contienen información importante y sobre todo estratégica, que explica el desarrollo de los territorios, expresan la visión y el modelo territorial que será el marco para su desarrollo sostenible. Son construidos mediante procesos de participación ciudadana. Además, orientan a la inversión pública y definen los proyectos integrales en torno al modelo de desarrollo planteado en armonía con el ambiente, considerando la importancia del rol que poseen los pueblos y las nacionalidades en la conservación de los bosques. Tenemos la ley de la circunscripción territorial especial amazónica, y respecto del Fondo Común, determina que los pueblos y nacionales indígenas accederán a los recursos de este fondo a través de sus organizaciones representativas para planificar e implementar sus planes de vida. Considerando estos planes de vida son considerados instrumentos de planificación que cuentan con criterios orientativos en los cuales están la autonomía y gobierno, la cosmovisión, la bioeconomía, el territorio y también su pluridiversidad. De igual manera, contamos con la Mesa Red+, que contribuye en la actualidad como uno de los espacios de involucramiento y participación ciudadana del sector ambiental más importantes y sostenidos del país, siendo un canal de diálogo directo y abierto entre la Autoridad Nacional Red+ de Ecuador y pueblos y nacionalidades indígenas, como son afros, montubios, mujeres y jóvenes. En estos 8 años de funcionamiento, ha incidido en la política pública que guía las acciones Red+. A su vez, ha sido un espacio de aporte a la formación de liderazgos y el empoderamiento de representaciones indígenas, tanto de mujeres y de jóvenes, que desde sus espacios realizan diferentes acciones por el clima. Además, generan el diálogo y además la incidencia en sus comunidades y organizaciones en sus territorios. La siguiente, por favor. Actualmente en el mundo se están estableciendo muchas regularizaciones para la producción y distribución de productos agropecuarios, existiendo más control sobre la cadena de suministro para demostrar una producción de bienes libres de deforestación que no contribuya al cambio climático, que no lo acelere y que respeten los derechos de las personas. Frente a estas nuevas tendencias globales, el Ecuador plantea la propuesta de certificación para la producción libre de deforestación. Establece varias definiciones y fusiona dos esquemas normativos. El agropecuario, bajo la competencia del Ministerio de Agricultura y Ganadería con sus buenas prácticas agropecuarias, y el ambiental, que se encuentra bajo la competencia del Ministerio del Ambiente, Agua y Transición Ecológica, a través del distintivo Iniciativa Verde de Producción Libre de Deforestación, generando la certificación BPA más libre de deforestación con una implementación a nivel de unidad productiva y de asociaciones. Ecuador promueve una agenda integral, equitativa y transparente, permitiendo trabajar de la mano con actores de toda la cadena, en la búsqueda de la mejora de la calidad de vida de la población, mediante la participación activa de productores, transformadores y consumidores, ya que el generar políticas orientadas a articular la conservación, restauración de bosques y asegurar cadenas alimenticias es una responsabilidad de todos. La siguiente, por favor. Para la puesta en marcha de esta propuesta nos hemos enfocado en la línea base de organizaciones de pequeños productores en la Amazonía, que cumplen con todas las especificaciones requeridas por los compradores en cuanto a calidad, volumen, certificaciones, monitoreo y diversos requerimientos más. El reto de una nueva modalidad productiva es responsabilidad de todos, ya que podemos cambiar en producción, pero es muy importante que exista una transformación de consumo responsable. Es por ello que el reto no es individual.
Perdón, si podemos ir cerrando, disculpa, pero estamos casi en el límite y todavía tenemos unas dos intervenciones cortas. Gracias.
Gracias. El reto actual de Ecuador frente al cumplimiento de los objetivos y metas de esta declaración sobre los bosques es contar con todas las condiciones habilitantes que nos permitan continuar con nuestra propuesta de desarrollo, así como el acceder a nuevos financiamiento climático para mantener las acciones emprendidas e implementar nuevas actividades que nos permitan alcanzar nuevos resultados. Claire, muchísimas gracias y muchísimas gracias también a cada uno de ustedes.
Muchas gracias, Glenda, y disculpa que hemos tenido estas dificultades técnicas de conexión y tenemos que cortar el tiempo ahora. I ask you to please your apologies to all participants, and I ask you if we could go over 5 minutes to allow for closing remarks, but also we have an intervention from Ghana that I would like to invite Ghana that wanted to speak right before we close. Please, Lena, can we invite Rosalind to speak before Patty? She had something to say before Patty, and then I'm going to invite Patty to close the event. Rosalind?
Yes, Claire, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And a very good afternoon to everybody on this event. Thank you for this opportunity for Ghana. And in Ghana, we see the New York Declaration on Forests as representing one of the powerful tools to collective action towards ending deforestation and providing value for efforts and/or results at doing same, whilst protecting the livelihoods of local communities and indigenous people. Though not all the goals have been achieved or will be achieved as expected, the refresh process, we believe, offers an opportunity to re-engineer the process to achieve the goals and achieve them at scale. Ghana therefore communicates its intention to endorse the New York Declaration on Forest goals. Ghana's intention to declare. Ghana's declaration of the intention to endorse, and to commit to this endorsement is because the country's REPLA strategy, which was launched in 2016, embodies almost 95% of the NYDF goals, and we see the achievement of the goals as very possible. Out of this REPLA strategy, 2 key subnational programs have received funding support from the Carbon Fund and from the Green Climate Fund. It is important to mention that these programs are included in the updated NDCs of Ghana to be outlawed soon. Therefore, as a country, we are moving from commitment to action on the ground and inclusion of same in key policy documents. This should be the way forward for endorsers to demonstrate a clear roadmap to achieve the goals. As we head to COP26, Ghana will showcase its actions, and we believe that we are also going to learn from other endorsers in other countries on how we can collectively address deforestation. Finally, Ghana suggests that the refresh phase looks at complementary initiatives, such as the FACT dialogue, which is also addressing commodity-driven deforestation and has strong areas for collaboration and action, particularly the actions on transparency and traceability could be a very useful tool to measure and track the progress of actions within countries that have endorsed the NYDF goals. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
And we thank you, Rosalind. And it's great to hear that Ghana intends to endorse the declaration. We welcome you with open arms. I think you have a lot to show, and it's great to see your commitment and the work that Ghana is doing in putting really in practice NYDF. And with this, I give the floor to Patty Ruiz from Grupo Ecológico Sierra Gorda. She's gonna close this event with some words that I think we all need to hear, some words of inspiration. Grupo Ecológico Sierra Gorda is an endorser of NYDF. It's in the state of Querétaro, Patty, and they have just received the Equatorial Prize from this year. They're doing amazing work on this wonderful reserve, working hand in hand with indigenous peoples. Patty, the floor is yours.
Amigos, mucho gusto. A sus órdenes desde la Sierra Gorda en el corazón de México. Yo hago votos para que esta declaración pase a ese proceso de la implementación en forma muy concreta y exitosa. Que consigamos verdaderamente abatir esos rezagos que hace un par de días, actualizándome, veía yo todos los reportes, ¿no? Y dice uno, Dios mío, ¿de qué manera nos van ganando la partida? Créanme que quedé con un sentimiento de tristeza y reconozco que todas las iniciativas, los que estamos aquí, los que reconocemos a la tierra como madre, los que sabemos del sagrado valor de la biodiversidad, cuando hablamos de los bosques, amigos, es toda una atmósfera. Es toda una presencia tejida en eones de tiempo, y así en cada ecosistema. Nuestra bendita, adorada, perfecta, sapientísima Madre Tierra. Creo que debemos, amigos, y que es el momento para que pasemos de esta inercia en la que estamos metidos y de la que soy parte y desde una sociedad civil apasionada. Yo creo que se nos llegó el momento, nosotros los que trabajamos a favor de utilizar herramientas nuevas. Tenemos que conseguir que nuestro corazón, nuestra creatividad, nuestra generosidad, nuestra alegría, nuestra conexión con la naturaleza, nos abran puertas nuevas, nos abran capacidades diferentes. Las necesitamos, amigos, porque se siente uno que estoy trabajando nada más por vergüenza, no por esperanza. Estamos perdiendo la partida, los ecosistemas se nos están yendo como agua entre los dedos. Y yo quiero hablar en nombre de algo que todos compartimos y seguramente es una fuerza poderosa dentro de nosotros. Somos padres, somos abuelos, y pensar que estamos dejando a nuestros hijos desheredados en la calle, desposeídos, pagando nuestras cuentas de todo nuestro afán de consumo y de poder. No todo lo que relumbra es oro. Lo mejor de la vida, lo más excelso, la naturaleza, toda esta sabiduría, no puede ser metida en un protocolo. No en uno solo. Debemos ser creativos, ir más allá, romper barreras, estimular múltiples posibilidades, hacer que todo coincida, alinear las estrellas. Y eso, amigos, solo lo vamos a conseguir si nosotros, confederados del planeta, ejercitamos esas herramientas nuevas, el bien común, la abundancia para todos, el amor como el hilo conductor, a ver quién puede dar más, ser útil en esta vida, conseguir que esto se multiplique, se expanda, se vuelva, se articule en una acción sembrada desde la base social, con amor, con la formación de una cultura que se va adaptando al cambio climático, una ciudadanía ecológica que reconoce su territorio, que es capaz de ponerse al servicio del bien común, emprendimiento local, respuestas a todo nivel, articulando soluciones, llenando huecos, tanta insuficiencia institucional que estamos viviendo. Es el tiempo de la sociedad civil, es el tiempo del emprendimiento, de ir más allá de lo establecido. No todo es mercado, no todo es un crédito de carbono. Hay otras formas de estimular esta acción. En Querétaro, hace 6 años que estamos operando el primer mecanismo de reducción de huella de carbono. Pequeños impuestos subnacionales generan un financiamiento fresco para valorizar económicamente el capital natural, que es propiedad de las comunidades locales, a las que con esta valorización les estamos dando una capacidad económica diferente. Es un combate a la pobreza frontal, con un protocolo local que está hecho a las condiciones de mis socios, dueños de los bosques mágicos de San Luis Potosí.
Thank you so much, Patty. We need to just ask you to end your wonderful comments so we can let people proceed. But please, any final thoughts?
Sí, vamos empleando las fuerzas del corazón, articulando una respuesta, una vinculación de múltiples actores, utilizando fuerzas, capacidades y herramientas de los seres humanos que necesitamos hacer surgir hoy día, hijos de la tierra. ¿Quién dijo que todo está perdido? Yo vengo a entregar mi corazón. Una ola de amor por el planeta. Gracias.
Patty, thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful comments. And thank you all for joining us. We apologize for going a bit over, but we do believe in trying to have people on live connections rather than pre-recorded. So sometimes that brings technical challenges, but thank you all so much for joining us. Please be our partners as we move forward with the implementation of the New York Declaration on Forests, and take Patty's closing words to your heart for the rest of your day, and as we all work together on this important work. So thank you, and we look forward to being in touch as we all move forward. Be safe, take care.